Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you, or good evening, afternoon. I guess it depends on when and where you're watching the show. We're on live every day, Monday through Friday at 8 o'clock Eastern, but of course you can watch our podcast anytime you want to. That's you don't have to miss a show, basically. You can have John Martin 24/7 if you want to. But we got a great show for you today. We're going to start out with someone who, I'm just really getting to know. I'll be honest with you, and that is Joe Rogan. Now, he has like 10 million views on his show every time he puts it out there. At least 10 million views. It's amazing what he's done with social media. But Joe Rogan is he's come out. He had an interview with a guy the other day, and he made a statement that white straight males will soon be silenced. And of course, he's being slammed by the left. So we'll get into that and talk a little bit about Mr. Rogan and what's happening with cancel culture and everything else, and whether or not he's got a point to be made there. And then BLM, Black Lives Matter, this should be no surprise to anyone, has officially, from their organization itself, and yes, they are organized, has sided, as I say in my little headline here, they've sided with terrorists because they have taken the side of Hamas in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And we'll talk about the ramifications of that. And then Kamala, we haven't talked about Kamala in a while. She seems to be in hiding when it comes to like the border issue. Go like, not me, man. You don't see me down here, and all that kind of stuff. But Kamala's making a list. She's got a list now of people who I guess it's a S list or a hit list. I don't know if it's like the little gal in Game of Thrones where she reads it out every night before she goes to bed. But I'm wondering how you get on that list. But anyway, we'll talk about that. But before we go any further, we have to talk about our sponsors that make all of this possible. If you want to check out our sponsors, look above the video. No matter when or where you're watching it, you could literally do it live. You'll see a description of the show, but you'll see links to our sponsor. And top of that list is BDU, which stands for Big Daddy Unlimited. BDU is our primary sponsor. They are your Second Amendment headquarters because you can go, if you click on that link, you can get factory direct pricing. Just follow the instructions. Factory direct pricing on guns and ammunition delivered directly to your door, as well as over 100,000 related items from tactical gear, survival gear, even protective wear, that kind of thing, as well as swag. And they protect, they being BDU, your Second Amendment rights on a daily basis. So check them out. Then patriotthreads.org, apparel with a purpose. Remember the promo code JMT, the initials of our show, for 20% off. Patriotthreads.org is a total fulfillment center, which essentially what they specialize in is charity events with a patriotic theme. So they produce sportswear, t-shirts, other kind of shirts for charities of your choice. Go to them, 20% off. They handle everything from the beginning to the end, to literally getting the money to the charity of your choice. Check them out. Recoil TV is kind of like what its name. It's about the Second Amendment, like Recoil. And they have a YouTube channel. Of course, we have our own YouTube channel. Good morning. How you guys doing today? Which we need more subscribers and views on. Spell it all the way out. John Martin Talks. But Recoil TV is all about the Second Amendment as well. They produce videos and demonstrations on everything from guns, ammunition, to tactical gear. You can't go wrong if you're interested in what the latest and the greatest is when it comes to Second Amendment. Check out Recoil TV. We're not live on there, but we have we have a channel within the channel. We're archived on a daily basis there. Check it out. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes here. This is from a publication I don't think I've actually used before. It's called PC Pop Culture. I don't think I've ever used them before, but it's about Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan slammed for suggesting straight white men will soon be silenced. Now, as I said earlier, I'm just really getting hip to Joe Rogan. I guess I'm a little bit behind the curve considering he gets over 10 million views a day and signed a contract with Spotify for over $100 million. So he must be doing something right. I really don't know a lot about Joe's politics. I was talking to my producer, one of my producers who's a much younger person and listens to Joe on a somewhat regular basis. And I asked him to describe it, and he says, well, he's probably libertarian. He's kind of a live and let live guy. And it does seem that way. I have watched some of his mostly clips from his show, but he's getting controversial, which I kind of like, because the reason he's getting controversial, he's saying things that don't toe the company line of the progressive left. And we all know it doesn't matter what your politics are. You can be 100% with them. If you deviate 1 second, especially if you have a message that carries as far out as Joe Rogan does, they gonna come for you, and they're coming for Joe. Joe Rogan is facing backlash after he suggested that woke culture will soon lead to the silencing of straight white men. I'm assuming he might be talking about himself. Rogan made the controversial remarks. Why are they controversial? It's true. Why? This is a question I have. Why is a truth controversial? Can anybody deny that straight white men, and now you could justify, you could say maybe they deserve to be attacked because, white men have, I used to say it all the time, white men were the scourge of the earth. And people say, what are you talking about? Well, I would say, and I just try to be honest, maybe I'm a little Rogan myself, a rogue or something, but, name me a country that was better off for the indigenous people once the white man showed up. There really isn't. Even as great as the United States of America is, you could hardly make the case that Native Americans fared very well under predominantly white leadership. So, I'm not about to say that white dudes like me aren't culpable in some things, but it's also, if you're going to be honest about that, you should be honest that there's a lot of good things that people have done. And there's no question like I say, you could say it's justified, but there's no question that white men are the flavor of the day to be attacked right now. I mean, especially straight white men. So I think Rogan is making a true statement. Is it controversial? I guess that's to the eye of the beholder. Rogan made the controversial remarks on the latest episode of his Spotify podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. Man, every time I hear experience, I actually think of Jimi Hendrix, but I guess I'm dating myself. During which he had a conversation with guest Joe List, who I got to admit is a comedian. I think he's a comedian, but I really don't know who he is, about how he believes woke culture has changed comedy. I'll carry it a step further. Woke culture has not just changed comedy, it's destroyed it. Nobody's funny anymore, hardly, because they're looking over the shoulder. I mean, even people like Chris Rock and Eddie Murphy and Bill Maher, hardly icons of the right, have said that they don't really want to even go to like the college campuses anymore because they're not politically correct enough, and the kids just aren't responsive. Jimmy Walker. Now I'm really dating myself, but Jimmy Walker was the guy from Good Times, the one that kind of coined that phrase, dynamite. Yeah, he's still out there. He's still performing, and he's actually pretty good. But Jimmy Walker actually said about a year ago when he first kind of started making a comeback, and of course COVID wiped everybody's comebacks out, but maybe that's going to change. But he made a point on a talk show I was listening to that was really interesting. He said that one of the things that's happened to comedy is it's so segmented now that every group has their own comedian. He made a case like gay Korean women. They have their own comedian, and I think he's right about that. He said, used to, you got up there and you were equally offensive to everybody, basically. I mean, if comedy doesn't offend just a little bit, now it doesn't have to be over the top offensive, but if it doesn't offend just a little bit, if it doesn't burn just a little bit, how's it? Maybe some of us are sicker than others, but I don't understand how it's funny if it's not offensive to somebody. That's the one reason I'm such a big fan of South Park, because South Park, one thing about those dudes, man, they are equal opportunity offenders. There is no sacred cows on South Park. and they will go after everyone, including straight white dudes like me. And I actually appreciate that. I appreciate that kind of stuff. But I would carry it, as I say, a step further. It hadn't changed comedy, the PC culture. It has literally destroyed it, man. Speaking to List, Rogan said he has concerns about not being allowed to talk due to his privilege. Well, he's under attack all the time due to his, I guess, white privilege. Rogan said, "You can never be woke enough. That's the problem. It keeps going." Well, I'm going to, and I don't want to pretend to speak for Mr. Rogan, but I'm only going to speak for myself. And I hadn't said this in a while, but if I say it, it certainly bears repeating, and it's going to be shocking to some of the snowflakes out there. When it comes to white privilege, I don't have any guilt. I don't have any white guilt. So if you're expecting me to be all guilty, you hit me, you played a race card on me, man. I'm kind of Donald Trumpish in the sense that you hit me once, I might slap you twice kind of thing. So I don't put up with it. I don't accept it. I just don't accept the whole white privilege. Now, am I saying that white people haven't had a leg up in a sense and dominant culture? Yeah, there's no question about that. But that has been historic. That's not unique to white folks, by the way. Do you understand that? Lean in, snowflakes, and get this. One race dominating another race over the history of time is not unique to white people by any stretch. The Egyptians and the Jews, right? Genghis Khan. He oppressed, you talk about oppressing white folks. He literally almost conquered Europe completely and beheaded people. That kind of thing. They actually threw infected and dead bodies over the wall. The guy was a piece of work, man. Apparently he was quite prolific because about a sixth or so of the entire Mongolian population has a direct lineage to him, but I digress. But there's always been people dominating. The Chinese. You don't think the Chinese have dominated during certain times, and they're trying to dominate now? Japanese. So every culture, even Indians, even Native American Indians, and certainly Indians in South America dominated. The Aztecs, one of the reasons why the Aztecs were able to be conquered by 500 conquistadors when they had tens of thousands is because every other Indian tribe around there that wasn't Aztecs, guess what? They hated the Aztecs because the Aztecs, pushed them down. Same thing with the Incas, all that. Anyway, I could go on and on and on. This idea that white folks are the only people who have oppressed people and enslaved them, I'm not defending it. I'm simply saying the idea that they're the only ones is total BS, man. That's why I battle ignorance and apathy daily, because if you think that, then you're just ignorant. You just have no idea about the history of the world, and maybe you should get some. But speaking to this, Rogan said, he said about, let me read this again because I want to make another point. Speaking to List, Rogan said he has concerns about not being allowed to talk due to his privilege. Rogan said, "You can never be woke enough. That's the problem. It keeps going." He is spot on that. You cannot be woke enough because the progressives will move the bar every single time, and they go to extremes. We talked about this a little bit on the show yesterday, which seemed to go over quite well. So check it out, our podcast. The way to do that, you could go to like Recoil, like we talked about, and you could go to any of our social media sites. They're pretty much archived on there. But another great place to watch it is America's Voice News. Now, we don't have a live show on there currently, but we're part of their streaming service. Of course, you could petition them to put us on there live. But America's Voice News is a great alternative to mainstream media. They stream on Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV. They have free downloads on your Android and your iPhone platforms, as well as their own channel 219 Dish Network and the Pluto channel, and growing. But click on their streaming service wherever you're streaming and America's Voice News, and you'll see show tabs on there. Click on the show tabs. You will see our show in like 16-minute segments, which makes it easy to digest. But progressives push to extremes. I talked about this yesterday when it comes to the abortion issue is a great example. And I mentioned, I really talked in depth about that because the Supreme Court is going to take up a major abortion case in October. And I'm telling you, if you didn't see my podcast yesterday, it is going to hit the fan, man. I mean, the left, you think they've been unhinged the last few years? They're going to come unglued totally come October. But I went into depth about that. But abortion, like I said yesterday, you know, it went from kind of when the Clintons were in the White House to safe, legal, and rare, to now they're pushing it to the baby's actually been delivered, like the late, great Rush Limbaugh said, the fourth trimester. Progressives will always take everything to the extreme. And I think that's what Mr. Rogan is kind of alluding to. Explaining that, he goes on to say, it keeps going further and further down that line, talking about political correctness and having to toe a certain line. The podcaster said that if you get to the point, talking about Mr. Rogan, to the point where you capitulate, in other words, give in, where you agree to all these demands, it will eventually get to a straight white men are not allowed to talk. And he's right about that. One of the things my wife says all the time, and this is one of the things she admired the most about President Trump, don't apologize. If you meant what you said, don't apologize. And Joe Rogan actually is pretty famous for not apologizing, although, and I pointed this out a couple of weeks ago, he backtracked a little bit when he came out about this mask wearing thing and how young people don't necessarily need to wear them. And he got hammered, even though about a week later the CDC basically agreed with him, but he got hammered and kind of backtracked a little bit. Now, I said at the time, and it may not be fair, because as I say, I've not really been a big partaker of Mr. Rogan, but the Joe Rogan that I've heard about before, like the $100 million contract to Spotify, probably wouldn't have backtracked. But I'm sure, reasonably sure, that Spotify went to him and said, you know, maybe you need to adjust this thing a little bit. And I could sit here and tell you, oh, I would never do that. But I'm not risking a $100 million contract either. Now, I'd like to be tested. As I say all the time, people say, winning the lottery will ruin you. Well, I'd love to be tested, Lord. So if you want to test me, I'm not asking to be tested in many things, but if you want to test me with a lot of money, make it rain, baby. I'm ready to be tested. I might not pass it, but I'm ready to be tested. But I get it, man. But as far as straight white men not allowed to talk, well, I've already seen that myself. Because even on like Facebook, you can watch it, and they've been crunching our numbers continuously. They put out this thing just the other day about recertifying our site, which I haven't done yet, but I will probably today, actually. But let's get into this. Because you're privileged, back to Mr. Rogan here, because it's your privilege to express yourself when other people of color have been silenced throughout history. Rogan went on to state that people would no longer be able to go outside because so many people were imprisoned in the past. I love that statement. And said he was not joking, and it really will get there. And then his guest, the comedian, began to laugh about it. So they don't, that's one thing about the left. They don't like laughter. They're always pissed off. That's one thing about the left, man. They get motivated by being totally pissed off. You know, the people on the right seem to get, and I'm painting with a broad brushes, I understand this, but like Ronald Reagan, now's not the time for pastels, baby. It's time for bold colors. So I'm a bold color painter. But it seems to me like the people on the right kind of get impassioned by like patriotic, red, white, and blue, and passion like that. And they're like joyous, and they're trying to push over. They may get angry from time to time, but the left, man, is just pissed off. The whole way the Democratic Party works is they get people pissed off, groups that wouldn't normally maybe associate. They're very, very good at this, by the way. But if you wonder how they do it, they basically get groups that are like, for instance, let's say black evangelicals. Pretty conservative bunch of people, black evangelicals. You won't find really a more conservative group of Americans than black evangelicals. I'm just telling you. But they end up voting along with the Alphabet City crowd, you know, the lesbian gay crowd, because they vote. I'm not saying they join together, but they vote for the same people. And what the Democratic Party is really good at doing is they get two groups like that, get them pissed off, not at each other, but pissed off about something, and then unify them behind a common boogeyman. That's exactly what they did with Donald Trump. I mean, our orange president, and I say that with laughter, I mean, he was the perfect person for them to do that, and they're still doing that. But I like this statement about imprisoned in the past. And he's absolutely right, at least if I'm understanding what he's saying. People right now are totally imprisoned in the past, like race relations, which everything now, I mean, think about how far we have strayed from Dr. King's dream, where he talked about, he dreamed of a time when we judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. We have, I mean, that is essentially dead right now, isn't it? I mean, I hate to say it, but it seems that way to me, because the ones with the biggest mouths that are getting all the attention, we're going to talk about it more in just a minute in another story, they believe everything is about skin color and skin tone. Even your intelligence is based on that. It's just absolutely crazy. But imprisoned in the past, because you think about it, some of the past leaders, and they're not getting much play right now, but people like Mr. I'm trying to think of his name. The Reverend Al, man. The Reverend Al. He shows up at every tragedy, right? Because without racial strife, how does he make any money? And he's making millions. Jesse Jackson has kind of been, for instance, pushed to the background these days. He hadn't really figured out how to make all this work. But without racial strife, he's nowhere. I mean, and so imprisoned in the past is, and I'm not saying, and I'll say this and we'll move on, I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. In fact, it exists big time. There are people, but I tell you all the time, you cannot legislate what's in a person's heart, at least not right now. So racism exists, but this idea of, quote, institutional racism is nonsense. And this critical race theory they're trying to push in schools is nonsense. And even black parents are beginning to speak out against that, because it is designed to push us apart. To me, you can't have an honest conversation about race unless you're willing not to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because yes, we've had some bad times. We've had some ugly times, but we've come a long way. We've had some good times, you know. So in order to have an honest conversation, you can't. But imprisoned in the past is a great statement. I'm going to play a video, and let me say this. One of the reasons why Black Lives Matter tore down Frederick Douglass's statue, who was a black man, one of the greatest Americans that's ever breathed a breath on this country, a black man. One of the reasons why they tore it, part of it was ignorance, but part of it was by design, because I maintain that Black Lives Matter and the far left progressives that are trying to take over this country and are doing a pretty good job of it, they don't want people of color, specifically black Americans, to have any pride in America whatsoever. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, but I want to play this video from Michelle Obama because it kind of, to me, smacks of being imprisoned in the past. Well, let's play it and we'll come back and talk about it.
Let me tell you something. For the first time in my adult lifetime, I'm really proud of my country. And not just because Barack has done well, but because I think people are hungry for change.
That's good enough. So that's on the eve of Obama becoming president of the United States. She says, for the first time in my lifetime, I'm proud of my country. Well, if you look at Michelle Obama's story, she had multiple reasons to be proud of her country and, quite frankly, to be proud of yourself. But pride does goeth before the fall. There's some little book somewhere that we used to read said that. But it's one of the 7 deadly sins, I do believe. But Michelle Obama, man, she had everything to be proud of before. And I'm not saying she shouldn't be proud of her husband's accomplishments, but she had every reason to be proud to be an American long before she ever met Barack Obama. And the fact that she hooked up with him in the first place, pride to be an American, right? Because, you know, where else is that maybe possible? Let's get on with this. His remarks, talking about Joe Rogan, his remarks quickly sparked discussion and controversy online. Truth tends to do that. Where many cast doubt about Rogan, that Rogan has to worry about being silent when his podcast has 11 million listeners. Oh, I downplayed him by a million. Sorry, Mr. Rogan. Per episode, according to The Independent. And he is also has a Spotify deal estimated to be worth over 100 million. Well, The 100 million, as I mentioned earlier, has kind of been used to, in a way, to try to silence or to control Joe Rogan. I'm sure he has to struggle with that on a daily basis. I wish I had that struggle myself. One person tweeted, "Someone tell Joe Rogan he got $100 million podcast deal. He's doing just fine unless he lost his PIN number." Kind of funny. Another person tweeted, "Joe Rogan on his international podcast are straight white men being silenced, pointing out the contradiction of his words." Well, they're missing a little bit of a point there. Just because Joe Rogan is big enough, see, they're trying to silence him, right? They're trying to shut him up by this. But just because Joe Rogan is big enough to actually continue to talk doesn't mean his point is mute. I mean, when's the last time, someone said when LeBron James or somebody like him was spouting their mouth off? How many times does someone raise their hand and say, "Excuse me, Mr. James, how exactly are you oppressed, sir?" I'm not saying that black men hadn't been oppressed. I'm not even talking about that. But LeBron James, he's become the spokesman for black men being oppressed by white cops, being hunted by white police officers, right? I mean, that's what he said. I mean, so why is LeBron James an authority on being hunted by white police officers? When was the last time LeBron James, if ever, and I don't, keep in mind, LeBron James has actually been famous in the basketball world since he was basically in elementary school, let alone high school. I mean, the dude signed a $90 million contract right out of high school with Nike before he'd even been drafted into the NBA. So to say that LeBron James, is why don't they question him? So Joe Rogan, just because he is able to have a platform and talk about the potentially silencing First Amendment rights of straight white men, and the fact that he's able to keep talking doesn't mean anything at all. But they want to lay that on him. And remember, LeBron, now that we're talking about the First Amendment, remember this classic from Mr. LeBron James, one of the most oppressed billionaires in the history of the planet. Check it out.
I don't want to get into a feud with Daryl Morey, but I believe he wasn't educated on the situation at hand, and he spoke.
James not commenting about any political tension in the region, instead focusing on how Morey's comments damaged the NBA's relationship with the country.
So many people could have been harmed, not only financially, but physically, emotionally, spiritually. So just be careful what we tweet and we say and what we do.
The backlash immediate.
That's good enough. I mean, here's LeBron. You talk about somebody, and LeBron James overall is a very intelligent guy. I mean, I admire how he manages his business affairs. I mean, one of the first people he went to talk to before signing these big contracts was who is the Omaha guru, man, Warren Buffett. He actually went and talked to Warren Buffett about finances. Pretty smart. LeBron James is a very smart guy when it comes to that, especially considering he only has a high school education. I'm just saying, I'm not knocking him. I'm admiring that. But when it comes to the nonsense he just got through spouting there, he said people could have been hurt financially, emotionally, and spiritually because this guy Morey from the Houston Rockets tweeted out support for the dissidents in Hong Kong. Well, I mean, LeBron James has making millions off the Chinese government that are the poster child for everything he just complained about. I mean, people are literally being killed and their organs harvested by the Chinese, LeBron. I mean, they're making your shoes in torture factors, LeBron. Women are being sexually attacked and sexually mutilated and with electric probes, for God's sakes. I mean, people are being disappeared in Hong Kong and China, and China's threatening to drop nuclear bombs basically on Taiwan. But yet, Mr. LeBron James is an authority on that, right? I mean, come on, man. But Joe Rogan, see, it kind of makes the point about Joe Rogan. No one is talking about silencing LeBron James, even though he says some stupid stuff on a regular basis. But they want to silence Joe Rogan, for speaking truth, whether you agree with it or not. Reacting to the remarks, another Twitter user, Slam Rogan, writing, sharing space is not the same as being silenced, you F. You can imagine what it said. The Nation journalist Ellie Mistal asked, can Joe Rogan point to one day in American history where straight white men shut the F up? Well, I can think of a couple, man. How about, and these are graphic. I got to tell you, this next video is graphic. I've played it before, but I want to give you a warning. It's got some very vile language. But let's play this and we'll come back and talk about it. Check it out.
We don't want you here. 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 We don't want your fucking money. We don't want your fucking money. We don't want your fucking taquerias. Owned by fucking white men.
That's good enough. I think you get the point. That was in New York City roughly about 3 weeks ago, less than a month, I'm pretty sure. And that was a Black Lives Matter demonstration hollering at a predominantly white crowd. And then just irony, the restaurant was actually owned by Mexicans. But they're not telling them to shut up. They're telling them to get the F out of here. We don't want you here. Can you imagine talking about the standards? As I tell you before, there is no double standard. There's a standard for the right and none for the left. But can you imagine me? Let's say a white dude like me. I mean, I guess I'm about mighty whitey, Captain Whitebread as you can be. Can you imagine with my accent standing to a predominantly black crowd in a restaurant and shouting, "Get the F out of here! We don't want you here! We don't want your money!" I mean, oh my God, man, they'd probably arrest me. They'd have me in the same jail as the Buffalo Head guy with the January 6th riot. I mean, you know I'm telling you the truth. But this idea that men, and I don't know if it's just straight men, should shut up has been, in the halls of Congress, right? Remember Crazy Mazie Hirono from Hawaii when she said this during the Kavanaugh trials? Check it out.
Yes. Of course it helps that there are women on that committee, but you know what? I expect the men in this country and the men in this committee, and many of them, believe me, because we all signed on to this letter to demand an FBI investigation, but really, guess who's perpetuating all of these kinds of actions? It's the men in this country, and I just want to say to the men in this country, just shut up and step up.
Just shut up, man. I got the news for you, Maisie. I ain't shutting up. Even if they somehow take this microphone away from me, I'm still not going to shut up. Here's the thing. We don't need people to shut up. We don't need that dude that's hollering up there in New York to get the F out. I'm not even advocating for him to shut up. Although I might if I'd have been sitting in that restaurant. But, that sometimes the old country boy in me is hard to keep down. But it ain't got nothing to do with black and white. It has to do with right, period. Because I would not appreciate that being shouted at my family, my children. It's just to say what you want to be. But when you start getting across in the line and I feel like I got to defend my family, then you got another thing coming, man. So, I may not be good as I once was. What's that country song say? I may not be good as I once was, but once I'm good as I ever was. So, don't push it. But here's the thing. I'm not asking anyone really to shut up. What I'm asking for, ladies and gentlemen, because my main and only political goal right now is to stop the progressive takeover of this country. Period. That's it. And I want you to join me in that fight. I don't care what your political party is there, lack thereof. I certainly don't care what your color is. I'm all about red, white, and blue, man, because I think even as imperfect of nation, because you remember it says in order to form a more perfect union. It doesn't say we're going to form a perfect union, but a more perfect union. Words matter. I'm asking patriots, regardless of color, not to shut up, but to stand up. We need to stand up and say this nonsense of trying to separate us is just that. We're not going to take it anymore. It doesn't mean there's not racism, but by God, we've made some improvements. We need to acknowledge that. We are on the right path, at least we were, And we need to stand up, because I always think about, and I say this, I'd love to meet this man, a Floridian of mine, because ladies and gentlemen, I am American by birth, Floridian, baby, by the grace of God, and I am glad to call this guy a Floridian and certainly an American. This is Maximo Alvarez. It's about 2 minutes, but it's well worth watching when he addressed the Republican National Committee, and he basically tells you what he sees happening and why we patriots need to stand up. Check it out.
Family has fled totalitarianism and communism, but my families don't run away. By the grace of God, I live the American dream, the greatest blessing I ever had. My dad, who only had a 6th grade education, told me, don't lose this place. You'll never be as lucky as me. I'm speaking to you today because my family is done abandoning what we rightfully earned. I have seen people like this before. I've seen movements like this before. I've seen ideas like this before. And I am here to tell you, we cannot let them take over our country. And I can never forget all those who grew up around me, who looked like me, who suffered and starved and died because they believed those empty promises. They swallowed the communist poison pill. You can still hear the sounds of those broken promises. It is the sound of waves in the ocean carrying families clinging to pieces of wood. Families with children who can't swim, but willing to risk everything to reach this blessed land. Those false promises spread the wealth, free education, free health care, defund the police, trust the socialist state more than your family and your community. They don't sound radical to my ears. They sound familiar. My parents only wanted one person to decide my fate, me. In America, I would decide my own future. I am so grateful to America, the place where I was able to build my American dream through hard work and determination. And I said this before, if I gave away everything that I have today, it would not equal 1% of what I was given when I came to this great country of ours. I still hear my dad. There is no other place to go. Thank you. I mean, the good Lord.
No other place to go. I mean, I can't get enough of that. I can't help it. I get emotional every time, and I've played that probably 20, 30 times. Every single time I hear it, it's fresh. There's no, Maximo, you were right, my brother. There is no place left to go. And so what we need to be doing is not trying to silence Joe Rogan, not trying to silence the guy in New York that told those people they need to get the F out of there. I'm not advocating for silencing anyone. I'm advocating that we stand up for the principles that made this the greatest nation that has ever existed, as imperfect as she is. And the only reason she's imperfect is because of people, right? Because as I say, there's this book out there that talks about something about all of us falling short of the glory, including our founding fathers, as great as they were. They had shortcomings because they're human beings. What I'm saying is we don't need to shut up. We need to rise up and say enough is enough, and we're not going to take it because we have no place else to go. And this is think about it. If there was another place to go for what people, the American dream, why would so many be people trying to come here in desperation, coming here? Why? I mean, I think the question answers itself. All right, let me calm down a little bit, take a sip. We're going to move on to our next story here, and this comes to you via Breitbart. And it is with no joy that I actually present this story, but it is truth nonetheless. Black Lives Matter declares solidarity with Palestinians. We are committed to ending settler colonialism. I want you to understand that term. We're going to explain it in just a minute. But here, ladies and gentlemen, you should not be surprised that Black Lives Matter is siding with Hamas against Israel, because that's what they've always done, and they actually talk about it here in just a minute. This picture of that gentleman in the middle with the two lovely ladies is Nicolas Maduro, the dictator, the communist socialist dictator of Venezuela. You know, a lot of the people that are crashing our border from the south right now, turns out quite a few of them are actually from Venezuela. And I understand why they're coming here. But that lady, the one in the black dress there, is one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, and she is about as lovey-dovey with Maduro, who has killed many people of color, by the way, and forced them in all kind of nasty situations, but yet she's hugging with him. So you should not be surprised that Black Lives Matter, the organization, I'm not talking about everybody that wears a t-shirt, but the organization of Black Lives Matter is a Marxist communist organization, so you should not be surprised that they are siding with the terrorist Hamas. The Black Lives Matter BLM organization said Monday it stands in solidarity with Palestinians, adding it's working to end settler colonialism. Understand what that actually means. It says a lot about what they're doing in this great United States. Settler colonialism actually means doing away with the United States of America. Because in their eyes, we are a settler colonialism country. We took this land from indigenous people. And you know, there's truth to that, certainly. But at this point, I don't think anybody really is advocating on a large scale for the United States of America. If you love freedom, you shouldn't be advocating for the end of the United States of America, because as imperfect as we are that shining light on the hill. And if we go, everything goes. But keep in mind, when they say that word, settler colonialism, they are talking about ending Western-style democracies around the world. And the Democrats are always trying to say, oh, they're the champions of democracy. Yet their foot soldiers, the Black Lives Matter movement, are not so much. The organization wrote in a post on Twitter, "We are a movement." Now, this is coming from Black Lives Matter. This is not me saying this. This is them. "We are a movement committed to ending settler colonialism in all forms and will continue to advocate for Palestinian liberation. Always have and always will be. Hashtag Free Palestine." Palestinian liberation. What exactly do they mean by that? Well, I can tell you one thing they mean by that: the obliteration of the Jewish state. Because you're not going to, in their mind, even though the Jews have been in that area, there is no Palestine. There never has been a Palestine. There has been a Jewish nation in place. Now, I'm not saying the Palestinians don't have a right to live there. That's not what I'm talking about. But there never has been a Palestinian state. The state of Israel, in some form or fashion, has actually been around for thousands of years. Thousands of years. And it's just not, and it's the only democracy. Isn't it interesting that the people who supposedly champion democracy are backing people who want to obliterate the only democracy in the Middle East? It's interesting to me. The statement came after Representative Cori Bush, Democrat from Missouri. She's a Black Lives Matter activist. She came to fame during the Ferguson stuff with Mr. Brown there, Michael Brown. But Cori Bush praised a BLM activist who reportedly called for the death of police officers in 2014 during a speech on the House floor last week. Representative Cori Bush, this is what she said: "The freshman Democrat spoke about Palestinian-American Bassem Masiri's action." He has since died, I think just of natural causes. "During the 2014 police shooting of Michael Brown Jr. in Ferguson, comparing the situation in Israel's West Bank with Black Lives Matter movement." Wow, think about that. This is something I've been thinking about for a while. The lies that are out there. They just flat out lies that people believe because the mainstream media has pushed them. One of the biggest ones is still tied in with Michael Brown and the Ferguson case. How many people out there believe that in whatever altercation he had with that police officer, that there was a point where he held his hands up and said, "Don't shoot"? How many people believe that? I bet you millions of Americans believe that. They've been led to believe that. The fact is, by eyewitness testimony at the grand jury, all of which were, by the way, black witnesses, said that never, ever happened. yet it is considered it's part of the movement. Hands up, don't shoot, right? How about more recently? How many people, if you were to poll them, believe that a police officer on January 6th during the Capitol riots, insurrection, whatever you want to call it, that a police officer was beaten to death by a fire extinguisher? How many people you think actually believe that? It's a total lie. It never was true. The coroner's reports come out. The guy died, and it's unfortunate that he died, but he died of basically an aneurysm at home, a stroke at home. He didn't die in the Capitol riots. But I guarantee you there are millions of people that believe that he was beat to death with a fire extinguisher. It's just not true. You know, and there's so much out there that's why I'm battling ignorance and apathy on a daily basis. Let me check my time. I'm just about out of time. But Bush said, this Corey Bush, not any Jeb Bush, Palestinians know what state violence, military policing, and occupation of their communities look like. So she's comparing what's happening in an American city like Ferguson to Palestine. I mean, the depth of these people's ignorance, if they truly believe this, is bottomless. And that's why I'm battling it every day. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki argued Tuesday former President Donald Trump failed to help bring peace to the Middle East. So it's Trump's fault. It's Trump's fault. Man, how many crises have we dealt with or are dealing with in the middle of in the last 4 months? I mean, the border was pretty much secured. Now it's a total S show. The Middle East was pretty much at peace. They were signing record peace treaties and peace accords of the Abraham Accords. Now it's a S show. We were totally energy independent for like the first time in my lifetime. And now we're running out of gas and people waiting in line. It is a S show, man. Biden, thank God that he didn't accomplish a lot in the 47 years that he was a senator, because what he's accomplished in the last 4 months as president is scary enough, man. That's why I'm battling ignorance and apathy on a daily basis, ladies and gentlemen. Join me, because there's no place left to go. All right, let's see. I'm pretty much out of time. I want to give a quick shout out to this story because it's really interesting. This is a Breitbart. I want to put this on your radar screen. Kamala Harris keeps a list of reporters who offend her. And basically, I want to know, she says, it says Vice President Kamala Harris personally keeps a list of reporters who have offended her, according to a report in The Atlantic. So I wonder, how do I get on this list? It says here, and we'll end with this, Harris herself tracks political players and reporters whom she thinks don't fully understand her or appreciate her life experience. When I read that, man, I just started laughing out loud. Her life experience, the only reason we even know who Kamala Harris is because she got on a couch like that with Where's My Willie Brown? I mean, we wouldn't even know. I mean, she went Hollywood, man. Maybe that's sexist, but it's truthful nonetheless. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to all of our social media sites, share them with others. Support our sponsors. Again, above the video, no matter when or where you're watching it, you'll see links to that. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. Let's all pray for our nation because, man, she deserves it and needs it now more than ever. But as I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day. Thank you.